Okay, let's see what are functions, why we are using them, and how we're going to use them. For example, here in onCreate, this onCreate is a function. I can understand it from this fun keyword here, and you can see that it has opened with curly braces and it has closed with these curly braces. You can see that when I click on these curly braces, it shows me and make it blue. Okay, let's create our own and desired function. For example, here in the onCreate function, which is the first function in every activity, is run, I will, for example, want to add two numbers. The first number is like this, number 1, and because it will be of type an int and constant type, I will say val. It will be, for example, 5. You can see that if I don't say that the number is of type int and I initialize it with an int, which is 5, Kotlin can recognize the type of this val, and there is no need to say, for example, of type int. Kotlin can recognize the type of number 1 from the value that is put into number 1. So let's just remove this and create another val, number 2, and this will be, for example, 7. And because I don't want to change them, I put them to val. And now let's create a var, because in the future I want to put something in this var. I will call it, for example, result. Okay, and this will be of type int because I want to put the addition of number 1 to number 2, and this will be integer, and let's use null safety. But there's a problem. We can see that I have a result underlined with a red line. Let's see why. We can see that here I have another variable called result2. So I couldn't create another variable with the same name that this variable has. So let's say result of addition or a result of sum. Much more nicer. Okay, now there will be no problem. And now I will say result of sum is equal to number 1 plus number 2. Great. The result will be put into result of sum. But you can see that writing a lot of code inside this onCreate function makes it a little or a lot messy. And we can organize it much more nicer. So I will, after this closing braces or bracket of this onCreate function, I will create another function. But how? I will use a keyword fun to define a function, and after I will write the name of my function. For example, let's say sum function. Notice I use the camel case style. Okay, inside I can put some parameters, but for now nothing. And I will open and close a curly braces and I will hit enter. Okay, inside these curly braces I will just copy and paste these four lines here. And now I will again copy this function and call it like this. So instead of these 4 lines, I will just use 1 line. Much more nicer, isn't it? Okay, And now let's see what is the result by say log.d. Let's make the tag by sum, and the message to the sum is plus the result of sum. Okay, now let's see what is the result. This is sum. Let's paste it here. You can clean your log by this trash button. Okay. The sum is 12. So you can see that I just resized this function by putting these 4 lines inside the sum function. But we can add some parameters to our sum function. For example, I want to pass these 2 variables to it, or vals. Let's just cut it from here, put it here. Okay, let's see how we can have these 2 numbers and make this function to understand these 2 numbers. You can see that because they are not defined inside these curly braces, there is a problem with these 2 numbers. I can say, for example, let's pass these 2 vals like this. I will pass the function, and this function, because it wants to get these 2 variables, will say I have number, you can say as whatever you want, for example number 1, or you can say for example x, and it will be of type int. Okay, and number 2, let's call it for example number 2, and it will be of type int. And the numbers that I'm going to use inside this function should be the same as these parameters, like this: number 1 as the number 1 we use here, number 2 as the number 2 which we have used here. And now you can see that everything is much more nicer. And if you run your program, you will have the same result as you have before. Okay, you have the same result as before, 12. Okay, now let's see if we can change this function again. Here, I want to even declare this function in the main too, like this. Okay, but this time I want to return the result by my sum function, and here, because this function will return the sum of these 2, I can easily say, it will be so nice, see, result of sum is equal to this function. But how? Here we have the sum function, the parameters that we have passed in. Here I will say, let the return type to be int. Okay, and now I can easily pass these number 1 and number 2. I can create another parameter, put them inside, put this addition inside of it, and then return it. Or I can just say, let's remove it and say return number 1 plus number 2, and there will be no need of this like here. Okay, so the sum function will return the sum of number 1 and number 2 and put it inside the result of sum. And now you can see what is the result of our addition. This will be the same like before. Okay, again the sum is 12, and you can see that I have made 4 lines in this function just to 1 line. The Main purpose of using functions is to make our and arrange our code much more nicer and make it much more clear. So you can see that variables is okay to put this inside the onCreate method, and this is the operation lines that I want to remove, and you can see that I can handle it but just by just one line of function, and there would be a lot of function that we're going to use inside this lesson, and you can see that how functions can make our job of programming much more nicer and our code much more readable.